Are we live? We're live.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi there. Uh, if you just tuned in, you're listening to and watching us here on this on our podcast, Taking It Black. And I have a great program scheduled for you. We want to talk about a lot of things that are going on in the community that can impact your lives. And that's important to me that we not just talk about things for the sake of talking about them, but that we actually, um, there we go. I see my Facebook Live people. I don't want them wondering why is she looking over here. So I want to give you information that you can actually use, information that you can apply to your lives, and that we can change our lives for the better. That's why we have this program, and it's not for any other reason, but to make sure that you get information that you can use. So let's get started. Let's see, where do we start? And this is, yeah, okay. I think I have my information in the backpack over there.
Here we go.
I do. Yeah, we will be started in give me 3 minutes and we will 3 seconds, not 3 minutes, 3 seconds, and we'll get started. Here we are. No, I think I'm good. Okay, so I want to start off talking about COVID. And the reason I want to start off talking about COVID is because we are at the point where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. It's some of us are vaccinated. I received my first dose. A lot of the people now are getting vaccines. We don't have the death toll that we had earlier. We're not seeing a lot of that, but this is still real. This virus is still real, and the variants of the virus are worse than the original virus, and so you don't want that. So I want to talk to us about not getting lax. You know, the governor in Alabama has lifted the mask order, which means you don't have to wear a mask in public unless you're going into a public place where they demand that you wear a mask. And I was at a store today, and even though the governor no longer requires us to wear a mask, she said specifically that stores can still require you to wear a mask. And indeed they did. So it's important that we continue to keep our social distancing, wash our hands with soap, that we use hand sanitizer when we don't have soap. It's important that we continue to do all of those things. And here's why. Because this virus is still deadly. And, you know, Black women, we're finding, are 3 times more likely to die of COVID-19 than white men and Asian men. Now, since the early part of this virus, we were under the impression that men were more likely to die of COVID, that men were more likely to succumb to that. Not white men, not Black men, not Asian men, just men. And so it was widely believed that men were more likely to die from it than women. But now the research is showing, really challenging that notion, that those more likely who have a higher likelihood of dying are from COVID are largely African American women. That African American women are 3 times more likely than Asian men and white men to die of this disease or this virus. Also, Black women are more likely to die from COVID and are less likely to be vaccinated. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as I go forward on this. But I really wanted to focus on this because it's more than just your chromosomes. I don't think it really will show that if you got an X chromosome or got a Y chromosome that you're going to you have a more difficult time with the virus. And I don't really think that it's so much that it's Black women because of their DNA. I really think, and I think that the studies will show that there's a strong association or correlation with economic and financial inequities. That African American women, we know that African American women make far less than Caucasian men. They are less likely to have insurance when you compare those two demographics. White or Caucasian men have more access to health care than African American women. And so that has to play. I would think that would play a strong role in whether or not African American females succumb to the virus. There was a separate research that also included Latinx Americans. They were more likely to die of COVID-19 and they were more likely not to have a vaccine. It's important that we understand that we talk about the correlation between the vaccine right now and the virus. If you're less likely to have access to healthcare, then you're less likely to have or think you have access to the vaccine, because the vaccine is free. You can get the vaccine for free. There, you don't, even if you don't have insurance, you can still be vaccinated. But because we have a population of individuals who have less access to healthcare, they don't realize that that vaccine is available to them. And so what happens is they just don't seek care, or they seek care when it's almost too late, when the cough has turned into a respiratory problem. So I'm going to encourage, the reason I'm talking about this, I want to encourage African American women, Latino women, to get the care that they need to take care of themselves, not just for themselves, but for their families. To recognize that you don't have to have finances to be vaccinated, that you can get vaccinated. The vaccine is free, can be free for those who don't have insurance. I have insurance. Also, you don't have to be afraid of the vaccine. And I'm saying this from a woman who, I was like, no, not taking it. I'm going to wait until I see what happens, because I know this country and I know the history of this country and healthcare or lack thereof with my people. So I'm like, no, I'm going to sit out a while. And then I started thinking about looking at the fact we had 500,000 people to die from this. A whole city has died from this virus. And when you look at the side effects associated with taking the vaccine, as opposed to the effects of getting the virus, there really isn't any question as to which one you should want to take, or which one you want to be associated with. And so for that reason, I decided I'm going to go on and take the vaccine. I have had my first dose. I'm going to get my second dose next week. I'm saying this because I've talked to so many people who are educated people like myself, doctorate level people, individuals who are nurses who say, I don't want to take that vaccine right now. I'm not calling that out or calling you out or poking fun at your decision. What I am doing is asking you to look more closely at the decision that you made in terms of, is this a decision that actually takes in the facts, or is it just fear? So we can't be so afraid of the cure that we are willing to run to the virus. And that's what's going to happen if we don't step up and take the vaccine. We're essentially running from the vaccine, running into the arms of the virus. So please, I'm going to encourage you, irrespective of your age, for women of color, we need to take this vaccine, and we need to get vaccinated. We need to encourage our families to do so as well, and we need to do this for our families, because this virus and the variants are worse than the original virus. Issues with the original virus, I should say. My concern about that is I have people in my family who have upper respiratory problems long term now. One had asthma, and now she has, I think, an acute respiratory, I forget what they call it, but anyway, it's the result of COVID. It's COVID related. And there are people who also have long-term cognitive issues. I want all my cognitive faculties. I want to be able to think clearly. I don't want to have these long-term effects of this virus when I could have been vaccinated and move forward with my life. So I want to encourage you to do that. I'm not trying to scare you, but I am saying it's worth looking at a second time if you, like me, had decided previously that you were not going to be vaccinated. So that was the first part of the first segment that I wanted to talk to you about. Please get vaccinated. I want to look. I told you that I wanted to talk about the National Republican Congressional Committee, and that's the committee that takes funding or collects funds for those who are running for House seats. And that committee has warned donors that Trump will find out that they opted out of the monthly donations if they don't check the box. Here's the story. The National Republican Congressional Committee has threatened its donors that it will tell the former president, Donald J. Trump, that they are defectors. Defectors of what? Defectors of what? Defectors of this clown show? Anyway, that they are defectors if they uncheck a pre-checked box when they are completing or cashing out to give a donation. That they have to do a reoccurring monthly fund for the campaign for the House GOP. They have to, if they're going to give $10, then they have to give $10 every month. If they're going to give $200, they got to give $200 every month. This is ridiculous. After donating to the NRCC, donors are shown a yellow box with a small check mark in it. And it says, if you uncheck this box, we will have to tell Donald J. Trump that you are a defector. Left checked, and the supporters will be agreeing to contribute every month. So they're giving you a warning. We're going to take money out of your account every month, whether it's $200, $100, $10, whatever it is you're going to give that one time, they're going to take it out every month. Now, when I gave during the presidential campaign, and I gave often, each time there was a box there that asked if you want to make a reoccurring donation. No, I don't want to make a reoccurring. If I want to give next month, I'll come back next month and give. But no, I do not want. I don't want Donald J. Trump in office, but I'm not willing to tell you can take this money out of my account every month. Well, this committee has picked up this trait from Donald J. Trump himself. This tactic was used by the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign in September 2020, all the way through the end of the election, those individuals who turned to the page, found it on Facebook. Do you want to donate? Yes, I will. I'll donate. They go to the page. They try and check out. They weren't given that option. They weren't told, if you uncheck this, we'll think that you are a defector. What they were told was, here's the box is checked, complete your order. They never unchecked the box, but it was never really highlighted, and they didn't read. Can you imagine Trump supporters who don't read? Notwithstanding, anyway, because they donated through that method, and they were agreeing to do this reoccurring payment on a weekly basis. This wasn't monthly. This was a weekly basis that Trump set up. They didn't read the fine print. That resulted in their accounts, some of them being completely emptied out. They found that they had several credit card complaints. They had several overdrafts. And the Trump campaign had to refund tens of millions of dollars to their supporters because of this tactic. Now, there was a great deal of criticism as a result of that. And so what I guess the NRCC decided, well, we're going to tell people. We're going to bring it up. We're going to make the box yellow. We're going to show them that you're donating on a monthly basis, not a weekly, a monthly basis. So they softened it some, right? They softened it by saying you're donating on a monthly basis. And if you don't, then we're going to tell Donald Trump that you are a defector. So they were giving the people a choice, letting them know you could choose not to do this, but if you choose not to do this, you're going to be a defector in the eyes of Donald Trump. Like, he's going to know who you are, right? He's going to know who you are. In Trump's situation, he collected tens of millions of dollars that he had to turn back over. The NRCC won't have to, and I'm going to explain why. There's a legal theory associated with this. Trump was deceptive in the way that he did it. And so people were unwitting in giving on a weekly basis. They had no idea they were doing. They had no reason to have an idea that they were doing that. The NRCC, however, has given them warning. So even though it is considered by those who are part of finance reform or campaign finance experts who are looking at campaign finance reform, they're saying that the tactic is maybe unethical. It may be something that is cruel to the people who are maybe draconian, but what it is not illegal. What I think it is a form of extortion. It's a form of emotional extortion or emotional blackmail to these people. Again, highly unethical, but it's not illegal. And here's why. It's not illegal because if anyone, whether it's Trump, whether it's you, whether it's me, if you say to someone, if you don't give me this money, I'm going to tell your wife or your husband that you're having an affair, that you had an affair. Okay. That's blackmail. That's illegal. You cannot do that. This doesn't rise to the level of blackmail because who the heck is Trump? I should say, who the heck is Trump, right? It's really of no moment. It has no real value or disadvantage to you. It's not going to affect you in any consequential manner. Although these people don't they don't believe it. They think that Trump is really looking at their name thinking, oh, this is not a good supporter anymore. It really doesn't have any value as it would if I said that I was going to tell your husband or your wife that you were having an affair or had an affair. That would make it illegal. If I say I could arrest you for coming on my property, but I won't. If you coming on my property, if the police are on their way, I will tell them to stop. And if you give me money right now, or just anything that you're exchanging money or some reward for the individual giving up some right that they have or some right not to be prosecuted, that would be illegal. But in this case, that's not, there's no issue of that right now. So I probably explained that really badly and I apologize for it. But that's the best I could do right now. They cannot get the money back in this case. They could get the money back in the case of Trump because why? Because it was deceptive. It's not deceptive here. They are telling you up front, do this. And if you do this, then we won't tell Trump. But if you don't do it, then we're going to tell Trump. But if you do, you're going to be charged monthly. So you did this. You went in with your eyes wide open. You understood what you were being asked to do, and you complied with it. You were complicit. So you can't come back now and say to the credit card company, I want my money back. You can't go to you can't complain to the bank, I want my money back. So having said that, Paul Ryan, remember Paul Ryan? He's the one that, kind of started all of this, even though he's no longer in office. Michelle Bachmann, that crew, they opened the door for this type of leadership from Trump. He says that it comes down to basic human decency. So now he has, he's elevated himself as the vice president of policy and litigation at Common Cause, which is a governmental accountability organization. That's where he is now. Now he's elevated himself to where he can say, you know what? I can pass judgment on people. I'm no longer a part of that nasty, grubby political game anymore. This just comes down to basic human decency. Yeah, right. Notwithstanding, I don't think that people should be bullied, even though I think that there's, I have real questions about anybody that will continue to follow Trump or the Republican Party who is still being driven by Trump and by his policies. I don't think that anyone should be tricked into making donations. I really don't. And I think that when you have these kind of solicitation tactics that cross the line, that something more should be done than to just say, well, this is, comes down to basic human decency. Then do something. You're in a position, they should do something about it. And that's the problem. Nothing's being done. I'm going to encourage you, if you're giving donations online, make sure, read the fine print, know what you're agreeing to, so that you won't be caught up in this, whether you're a Trump supporter or not. Make sure that you know what you're agreeing to. This is, I think that it should be illegal. It's not, but it should be. It should just be simple. You want to give this month? Okay, here, give this month. If you come back next month, we're going to send you a notice. If you'd like to give next month, then you can give next month. I mean, it's just only, as Paul Ryan says, human decency, right? So if you just, I can't say if you've just tuned in, because if you've just tuned in on Facebook Live, you're looking at Taking It Black. And we are a part of 987 KISS FM, and we are a web series. And I appreciate your checking in, seeing what we talk about. And I promise I'm going to work at trying to get a call-in number so that I can hear from you, because that's the best part of the program. I really love hearing from the audience and hearing your perspectives on these things. Now, and if I didn't tell you, I'm attorney Valerie Hicks Hale, and I really enjoy. I've been doing radio since 2008. I really enjoyed this, but as I said, I really enjoy talking with you. I want to talk about, in this next segment, I really want to look at the perspectives on state-sponsored terrorism, or, in other words, unjustified police violence against citizens. And it really is, I say, state-sponsored terrorism, because when the state gives someone a gun and sanctions them to shoot to kill in certain circumstances, and they violate those circumstances, then that was sponsored by the state if that individual is not held accountable. And too often, that individual is not held accountable. All police officers? No. Too many? Yes, because one is too many. Because the state gave you a gun and gave you authority to tell me that I can and can't do certain things while you stand over me with the gun. The standard should be higher for you in your actions with that gun. But that's not what we see too often. I hope that the tables are turning. And I'm going to have someone talk with us today who has expertise in this area. And his name is Wilson Hale. I'm going to pull this down so we can all be a part of the program here. And I'm going to ask him to talk about a certain part of this that I want to hear about, regarding what police officers are trained to do, that sort of thing. So let me just start with the fact that, as I said, officers can avoid legal sanctions. They can avoid legal responsibilities for using lethal force on a person if they use certain words, certain magical words. And those words were, I was in fear of my life. I thought they were going to kill me. I thought I was going to die. And if you use those words and you are a police officer, just uttering those words would result in your not being punished. And we've seen this too often. I want to talk specifically about one such occasion where an officer was not punished. And I want to liken it to what we're seeing with George Floyd, the trial of Chauvin, where George Floyd was subjected to a 9-minute murder, a 9-minute act of homicide that we all watched. But I want to go back a few years and look at Philando Castile. If you recall, he was stopped by a police officer. The officer's name was Geronimo Yanez. And Geronimo Yanez took this man's life because he had a busted tail light. Now, Yanez won't say that's why he took his life, right? But that's why he stopped him. That's the only thing he did wrong. Okay, he had a busted tail light, and now he's dead. After stopping Mr. Castile, Yanez asked him to give him to turn over his ID, his driver's license. And in the process of looking for his ID, he said, "Officer, Mr. Castile said, 'Officer, I want to let you know I do have a small caliber weapon in the car.'" And Mr. Yanez already had his hand on his weapon and began to start shooting, saying, "Don't pull it out, don't pull it out," and began to start shooting. I think he shot 7 times with the man's fiance and a 4-year-old child in the back seat. Here's the thing that concerns me when I look at both these trials. we have this trial this case that we saw on video, and we watched this man die on video because his fiance had the presence of mind to video it, to go Facebook Live. Yanez walked on this. He was charged, but he walked. And he walked because he said the magic phrase, the get out of jail free card that's only available to police officers. And that was, I was scared to death. A lot of other people can say, I was scared to death, and that's why I did it. And they still die, and they still have to, not die, they still are held accountable. Why? Because a reasonable person in that situation would not have been scared to death. He walks up on this man, asks him for his ID. He's trying to get his ID. He sees he's trying to get his ID. And in the midst of telling him that, he also tells him that there is a small caliber weapon in the vehicle. And at that point, he shoots and kills the man, and he walks free. Why? Because he says, I was in fear for my life. I had no choice. I thought I was going to die. Now, even though Castile's death was captured on video and it outraged the country, he was still acquitted of second-degree homicide, second-degree manslaughter. In this case that we're looking at today, we have seen a trial going on for several days now. Officer Chauvin snuffed out the life of Mr. George Floyd over 9 minutes, and we all watched as it happened. And many are asking, will he walk free as well? And there may be some differences here, but I want to hear from an expert. Well, yes, an expert, because you have 35 years. Mr. Wilson Hale, welcome.
How are you?
Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.
And if you're wondering, yes, Wilson Hale's my husband. But you have 35 years of law enforcement experience. And I want to, before we even get to today's trial, I want to go back, as I said, a few years, looking at the Castile case where Yanez walked away from a second-degree manslaughter charge because he said, I was in fear for my life. How is it that a properly trained officer can walk up to a car and fear and shoot someone, give 7 shots, open fire 7 times on this individual? I have to be careful. I don't know if it was actually hit 7 times, but I know it was 7 shots. How do you do that? From the point that you stop somebody from a broken tail light to the point that you're willing to shoot at them 7 times, killing them, because you're in fear for your life. Talk to us about the training and how that could possibly happen.
Well, it's simply, for the most part, of what we visualize, that actually this has been going on in the nation for centuries, even prior to us. And it's just another dog whistle that says, hey, to the people that are on the jury that look like me, I did this. I need you to stand by me. I don't get the dog whistle part of it. A man that most people that fear for their life, even a dog, when it fears for it, it runs in the direction of his house, as he should be running in the direction of his car. He moved around to the front of the vehicle and had very much eye-beam sight on this young man, the 4-year-old, and his fiance, and he continued to engage with him while he's saying that he's in fear of his life. Yet he has nothing in fear in front of him. He doesn't see a weapon. The young man extended the courtesy of letting him know that I have a weapon in my car. It's in my car. He didn't say it was in the glove box, in the trunk. My wife has it in a purse. It's just to give him warning that I am recognizing you as an officer, and I'm going to give you the utmost respect to let you know that there's a weapon in my car. He didn't have to tell him. It's not required by law. So as far as Mr. It is very practical that his name is, what did you say?
Geronimo.
So,
but Geronimo was supposed to be a very brave Native American. You know, Geronimo was a very strong and courageous Native Americans. So how does someone with the name Geronimo become so fearful of someone who's sitting in a car with a baby in the backseat?
Maybe the mother and father wanted him to be a Geronimo.
Perhaps
that's it. It's nothing wrong with wanting your child to reach higher goals. Yeah. But the officer here, and we have some great officers, at least 90, we're dropping percentages. I was at 98%, but I'm about 90% now. Yeah, 90% of our officers are very good officers. Yes. They are there for the cause. They go to work and they show up on time. They want to do their job, and they care about for people. The public. Mm-hmm. They're out there. They're trying to engage and make sure that they protect property as well as bodily harm. Mm-hmm. They don't want to get harmed themselves, but majority of them will step in an obstacle way and make sure that they protect the public. Mm-hmm. This young man, Fernando Castile, he respected what the officer was. He pulled over to a wide open area that was on the shoulder of the roadway. He acknowledged that, hey, I do have a weapon. He's sitting there. No person that I've ever engaged in had their family in the car and would put their family in danger of being shot or put them in fear of their life. Mm-hmm. Their 4-year-old and the female that his fiance that was sitting on the side of, loving them, he would never put himself in that harm. I mean, my heart goes out to his family, and I know they never did get the answer that they were looking for. Mm-hmm. This man walked free, but as you say, the magic word of "I fear for my life," and it's a catch-all for, hey, it's a dog whistle for the common denominator of blue.
But I would give credit to say, if you're out there, you are an officer, and you run up on somebody who is coming toward you with a weapon, you tell them to drop the weapon, and they don't drop the weapon, whether they have it pointed at you or not. If they have a weapon in their hand and they're coming at you, and you say, drop the weapon, they never drop the weapon, I could see saying I was in fear for my life. Now, that person may not have had any intentions of harming you, but the very fact that you're out on the street, you have to protect yourself. You've got to go home to your wife and family every night, or husband and family every night, depending on who the officer is, then I can see that. But in this case, what I'm saying is, even if the officer were wrong, it was reasonable. This doesn't seem reasonable. So how does that, in fear of my life, how is that? And I know the answer. Well, this is a radio program. I mean, this is a podcast, so I have to explore this. I want to have it explored so people can understand that, because it is frustrating.
We have to extend, and a trained officer would know the depths of where he can go. If somebody did approach him in that manner with the weapon, he could pretty much gauge that person and know at what point he may need to fire his firearm, whether he needs to pull it or not. From the video, he started unbuckling his firearm as he approached the gas tank, and the weapon was already.
So even before he got to the window
got to the window. Mm-hmm. I can't say that the officer seen what this young man looked like as he was passing by. He just knew he was approaching him. It appears that he was more afraid to approach the car than anything, but he just wanted this contact. And it's nothing wrong with an officer retreating to save somebody's life. I have retreated several times to disengage, but once a number of people, there's a continuum program that they have called PPCT, which is an officer continuum program. The first thing it is officers present. That is get in line or throw out there that, hey, I am present. You should engage in the conversation with me and do practice obeying rules and regulations as process begins.
That's a part of the training.
Mm-hmm. That is just the officer's presence. If they don't comply to the officer's presence and behave, then you go into a verbal direction like, hey, stand over here, keep quiet while I engage in this conversation with the other party. You stand over here. You need to separate the two. But this is a force continuum plan. So the officer, if they are indeed in training and they know they're training, and some just not made to be officers, they just were never acquired.
I mean, if you are approaching a vehicle and you already are beginning to unbuckle your gun, and this is supposed to be a traffic stop.
Well, this guy, he's emulating an officer in an officer's uniform. He is not ready to be out there on his own. He's only emulating, and once he gets up there, he sees how this young man looks, and he sizes him up with a threat that is a common denominator among people that are not black or brown, that and it's been repeated so many times, it is embedded in him that this is a threat to him. It's not a threat from a weapon. It's a threat from a
just
person
by being black.
Yes.
A black human. Okay.
So it's not written in Title 32 or Title 13, Title 14 that being black is a crime. But when approached by people that are intimidated or scared of you in some kind of action, the action that will take place. And there doesn't have to be as they say, a action to a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't have to take place. I've seen so many people, and I know so many officers that has never even been in a fist fight.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time they get hit a punch, that's come from training. The first time they get hit a punch, they're actually outside on the side of a road in an altercation, maybe even in the interstate or in the road itself, and they don't know what to do. But this guy has backup that sits on the right side of his car. And if you notice the video, the officer that was his backup never felt in fear of his life. He never drew his weapon. Even when the officer fired the 7 shots, which 5 of them actually hit this young man, he never pulled his weapon. He never felt in fear. That tells me that this engagement, he never even say, most of the time when an officer actually arrived, it is courtesy to let the other officer know, hey, he has a gun.
Right.
That way he will know what the action is. He has a knife, he has a gun. Yeah. But before he can even get to that point, because his hand was already engaged on his weapon, he deprived this young man of even going home for that evening.
So now we saw that. We saw how unreasonable that was, and we saw that he walked. Now let's talk about what we're seeing now with this trial in terms of what we saw and the likelihood of this individual, Chauvin, walking as a result of saying that I was in fear for my life. Even though Chauvin didn't say it, his lawyers.
Well, even though Chauvin didn't say it, let's make sure this is understood. It is already understood. It doesn't have to be said.
Okay. Yeah.
It's already understood.
Yeah, he's trying to,
How many times has this been repeated? Yeah. And we get the same results. They have already showed factors that it was an incorrect and improper movement of what Chavez has done because of the $27 million that they have already paid out.
Oh, well, they'll say, well, in this case, you're right, because the city has agreed that what he did was wrong. His superiors have said that what he did was wrong, and other line officers have said that's not a part.
That's not a part of training. It's not a part of policy.
But how is it? I'm talking about and I'm not asking you to speak from an attorney's perspective. I'm asking you to look at this from a law enforcement perspective. How can he say I was in fear of my life? I mean, how do you, in line of what you saw, is it reasonable even a little tiny bit for him to say that I was in fear of my life? And look at the various factors.
Well, looking at the various factors.
What would demonstrate that he was in fear of his life when you look at that video?
There is none. There's at least 5 officers in the video itself. He has 3 kneeling down, 1 in crowd control, that they said that the crowd was some harmonious, angry crowd that's over there.
That was begging him not to kill a man. That was
that wasn't how he seen it. They were speaking a different language. It wasn't not begging them. It was not that he was killing the man. It was that he was in fear of the crowd and he really couldn't pay attention. He could not pay attention by kneeling on him. He never noticed that his eyes were rolling in the back of his head. He never noticed that his breath was going out. He never noticed that he had his entire 95 pound body weight rested with his knee engaged in his neck and in his back,
because
in the backside of his lung.
His attention.
Just as much oxygen is inflated in the lungs. You can hit someone in the back and knock the oxygen out of them just as well as you can hit them in the chest. By him being out in the prone position, even though his hands were not out, but that is a prone position, he's handcuffed. He's already subdued. What fear is there? I don't see it. The other officers didn't see it. Even training didn't see it. And I'm sure FBI don't see it. He's handcuffed and he's prone out in that position for 9 minutes and 36 seconds, which 3 minutes of that 9 minutes, he was he was already unconscious, and his mind was already leaving the fact that he did not have any oxygen in his body.
Let me ask you, if he were somehow, I can't even imagine ever being in a position where you would have to put your foot on someone's neck, on their neck. I'm not talking about shoulder, the neck. But to the extent, even if you put your foot, your knee on someone's shoulder, do you not check periodically to see whether or I'm not speaking of you, should the officer not check periodically to see that the individual is still okay, and that the individual is not it's somehow distressed?
Well, he shows signs of distress. His eyes, his speech getting blurred, as well as not as forceful as he was when he started. And he started speaking that he didn't even know, he wasn't even getting the oxygen. You can tell because he wasn't even speaking in his right mind. His mother had already passed. So he's already delusional at that point. He's delusional. It's almost that you go into this faint before you actually lose that last oxygen of breath. So even when people get up early in the morning too quickly, you feel this faint, you feel like you have to sit back down. He's at a point past that times 10 where he feel like his breath is taken out of him so much to the point that he tries to use his index finger to lift himself up by pushing off on a tire just to inflate his right lung. He was trying to breathe through his hand, if you would. So at that point, the more that the public spoke to this officer, he was more deemed to say, you are not going to tell me what to do. I think
that's what it was.
This is a message to you that this could be you too.
I do.
This is a Me Too moment, and you could be here too. Just to let you know,
he was letting them know, you're not going to stop me. And the longer you tell me to stop, the longer I'm going to stay here because I am in charge.
And I have been in charge through all of my discipline action. I have come out on top and I'm still in charge.
And so when we look at this in terms of his putting his knee on someone's, again, neck, not shoulder blade, but neck, being in fear of, going back again to the magic words, in fear of my life. How are you in fear of your life if you show no agitation? I mean, it's as though he has no agitation himself whatsoever. He is, his hands are in his pockets. It's not as though he's trying to secure him or, moving to stop him from moving. He's nonchalant. He has his hands in his pocket nonchalantly. I'm just going to do this until all the life is out. And then when all the life is out, I may stop. How does that demonstrate? And again, I know this is rhetorical. How does that demonstrate that the individual who is applying that kind of pressure is indeed in fear of their life?
He can't get to the point of where he's in fear of his life. His legs were already controlled by the third guy that was on the back right in the backside of his knee. There was the second guy who was in his midsection up toward his pelvic area that was also kneeling down on him. And secured him as well. The young man himself, as they showed the gouge from the eye as well as the side cheek where he had was so much force was on him where it scrubbed the skin off the side of his cheekbone down to his flesh, through his flesh down to his bone. He just couldn't go any further.
God.
So by him placing his left knee on his on the side of his neck, it is what is called a tracheal. It's a tracheal block, and you would only use it. There's no point where any officer would use that whatsoever. We teach it because we teach you not to use it, as to what it can do of cutting off the breathing patterns or the flow of oxygen, and regardless of him having any other underlying conditions, which he had, did not help any.
Yeah, and I want to go there because we only have about 10 minutes left on the program, and I want to go there to talk about the fact that his pre-existing conditions, you know, they're trying to suggest that his pre-existing conditions played a role in his death. And I want this to be clear. If you got children, and this goes for anybody, I want you to understand there is a legal theory that says you take your victim as you find them. It doesn't matter if it's a criminal victim. It doesn't matter if it's a civil case. If the victim has a eggshell skull or a thin skull, and your actions cause them to crack their skull and die, and another individual who may not have had a thin skull or eggshell skull, as we say, having that same action occur to them would not have died, you still are held accountable to the actions that or the consequences that occurred with this individual with the thin skull. I want to be real clear here that regardless of the injury sustained, because this individual had a frailty or fragility, to the extent your actions cause that injury, you're going to be held accountable. And I'm going to give the example of if there is an individual who's sitting in a car at the light, older person, they're just sitting there waiting for the light to change. You come barreling out in your vehicle. You've just robbed the bank. Hadn't hurt anybody. Didn't even have a gun when you went in. You told them to give you the money. They gave you the money. They believed you had a gun, but you didn't show them a gun. You got in your vehicle and you left. You wanted to make sure you weren't going to hurt anybody. You just needed some money to take care of some medical bills, whatever. So you get on the road, you hit this car. The individual in the car is an older person, and they die from that injury because they have some underlying health issue that caused a heart attack as a result of this accident. Well, you're going to be held accountable for that death, and you're going to be charged with felony murder. You're fleeing a felony. You're fleeing a felony. You're fleeing felon who harms someone who ended up dying, who injured someone who ended up dying. You're going to be held accountable for that. That's the same thing that is in this case with George Floyd, whether he had a heart condition or not. That is a ridiculous, but if that's all you got, I guess that's what you have to do. But that is a ridiculous defense to say, well, it was his heart. His heart gave out because he took drugs. His heart gave out because he had heart trouble. No, you caused it. Your actions caused it, because if you had done anything other than what you did, he would still be alive.
Well, the defense attorney will argue that he is an officer and he's held to a different type of tactic than an individual that is just out there on the road committing the crime. And that's what they would try to get off on. And he only have to convince one person.
I'm glad you said that. A prosecutor has to convince all 12 individuals that their side of the story is the right side of the story and this person is guilty. The defense only has to convince one. And that's where I hear you're saying it doesn't matter how strong the evidence is. It doesn't matter in any of these legal theories.
Yes.
You only need one person to say, no,
he's an officer.
He's an officer, and no matter what.
And no matter what, because that rule has not changed. And that's what we're up against. The fact that they can use this, and they do not have to go by the force continuum rule. They can use this and say, hey, I fear for my life. By him sitting on the back of in the back of his back with his knee on his neck, he can stay, I fear for my life. And someone that grew up like him, that looked like him, probably smelled like him, actually can say, I understand what he's saying. I felt for my life when somebody walked by that didn't look like me, walked by my car at the mall, and I had to lock my door. So I understand that he was in fear of his life for even having to put his hand on that kind of man.
And I'm just getting angry as you say that, because I recognize that what you're saying is accurate, that irrespective of the evidence, there's nothing in that video that would suggest that man has reason to be in fear of his life. But because of their background and their ability to empathize,
correct,
with the officer, yeah, I feel I'm going to go with them. No, I know you may say that, but and then that's a hung jury.
It's a hung jury, and all they need is just a little simple mom that's a home mom, and her son is an officer, and he comes tell her all kinds of stories pretty much on a weekly basis for the last 5 or 6 years of how he's having to deal with these people that should not be in their country.
I agree. That is
you have 73, almost 74 million people that voted Republican, and they knew, even when you just read where he has infiltrated their own bank account, and they'll still vote for him. So why won't they vote for this man to be free?
Well, we're going to be prayerful, because at this point, all we can do is work. And I really do think the prosecution is doing a great job in this case. They're doing an excellent job in this case. So all we can do is work and pray. They're working. We're going to pray. And prayerfully, those individuals on the jury, the prosecution has had an opportunity to select a jury that will be fair and will allow the evidence to guide their decision.
If the evidence is heard.
If they will allow the evidence to guide their decision, I do think in this case it is so strong. I don't see him walking.
I don't see him walking on a level of prosecution for the correct way of how to hold people accountable.
Yeah, but we know that it's
but we know
correct.
There are 12 chances of him getting off.
Anyway, you have been listening to Taking It Black here on 987 kissfm.com, 987kiss.com. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of our podcast. I'm going to hopefully next week, I will have a telephone number where you can call in. And I would like to hear what you have to say, because that's the best part of the program, hearing from you. We have a great audience. We have great, one thing about my audience, they were informed, and I really appreciated that they had great insight. So you have a great day. You have a great rest of the week, or week coming up, I should say. And we'll see you back, same place, same time here on Taking It Black.